Next, we're going to look at connecting to the database. So after we've got hopefully a database created in one form or another, we need to connect to it within our code. So we're going to look at a couple different codes. Again, I'm opened up the chapter 14 example project here, and in that there was a connection test that covered in the textbook. I modified it and called it Connection Tester 2, and I'm going to open that up and look at that. It is a little form that has a spot for a connection string and a connect button. The connection string is what we use to specify what database we're going to connect to. So not necessarily what table within that database, that comes after, or fields, but just the database itself, what database file or database connection we're going to use. And that's called a connection string, and it's a very important object that we'll be using. In fact, all of our code will use every one of these files and examples will use a connection string to establish the connection to the database. And it's not always easy to create this connection string in different ways. So let's just look at the code here. So here's our code. When the page is first loaded, we create a connection string variable and we hard code the connection string in here. You can see it's very long. We talk about the data source, that's the database we're getting to it, and here we're specifying one of our local SQL Server databases, and talk about the initial catalog. That's the database itself we're opening up, and we're opening up the pubs database. Talk about how what security we're going to be using for logging in, and some other elements we're specifying here. And then when we actually have that connection string set up, we'll use that to create an SQL connection. So there's an object called SQL connection, and we give it a connection string, and that creates the connection to the database. Once we've kind of created one, instantiated one of these, and in this case we're calling it my connection, then we can try to open up that connection, and then we can read data from that connection. We put that within a try block. We have to catch certain errors that might occur when trying to reference this database. So here we're not actually even grabbing the fields in the database yet. With an SQL statement, we're just opening up the connection and then grabbing the server version and the name of the database and stuff like this. So we're not even grabbing the fields of the database here. And here we're closing that database after we're done. So all this little program will do will open up a connection to the database and then close it up again, hopefully. So here are my connection strings here. I can hit connect, and it should say what version of the server we're running, what database we're connected to. It first should open up the database, and it should then close the database. So if you need some help setting up these connection strings, here's some things you can do to figure out what connection string you'll be using. Let me just stop this program from running. So one is we can look in SQL Server and grab the database string there. So I'm going to go back to the SQL Server Object Explorer. I'm going to go down and in this case find my pubs database. So it's inside this local DB under databases, pubs. And then if I click on that, well actually I don't even need the pubs database. I just need the database that pubs is in. And I should be able to see the properties over here to the left. So again, I was confused for a second. I want to go to the pubs database, and then I want to look over at the properties, and there should be a connection string property here. And I should be able to just grab that, copy that whole string, and use that in my code. And so that's in fact how I got this code here, is I pasted that in there. The one problem with that is when you paste the string in there. Let's just go through this. I then defined a string equal to that, and then at the end I'm going to end these quotes and put a semicolon, so I have defining that string, this long string here. But if I look through, one of the issues I have that you'll run into when you're defining a string in C# is that the backslash is an escape character. So wherever there is a backslash, you have to do 2 backslashes. to actually get a backslash. And also, if there's any double quotes in here, later on we'll see one with double quotes. There's only you have to put a backslash in front of the double quotes. So every backslash and every double quotes, you backslash have to convert to 2 backslashes, and a quotes you have to convert to a double to backslash double quotes, and we'll see that in a sec. So again, we can pull the data string, the connection string, right from our database specification here, and that's usually the best way to get the connection string. There are also websites that handle them. There's www.connectionstrings.com. People sometimes it's very hard to find the right connection string, so here's a website that just defines connection strings for lots of things. So let's say you're trying to connect to a Microsoft Access database or an Oracle database or an Excel spreadsheet or even a text file. You can do that. And in fact, Microsoft provides a whole bunch of sample connection strings for connecting to different servers in different ways for us. And so I'll post links to both of these sites on the notes. Now, let's look at how we manage these connection strings. Right now, we were putting them inside our file as a defined constant. One of the problems is that we're going to need this same string in all of our ASP files. Every web page is going to need this same string. And for maintainability, we're not going to define it always in here. We're going to define it in a special file called the web config file. Inside the web config file, we can specify certain configurations. And I think this is the first time we probably looked at the web config file. So we will continue to add things to the web config file, particularly when we get to security and login information. But now I'm just under configurations. This is an XML file. Under the configuration tab, so between the opening and closing tab, I'm going to add a connection string open and close tag here, and then I can specify my connection string. And so here's I just have a connection string equals quotes, and I specify the whole connection string here, and I give it a name. In fact, I have 2 examples of the pubs connection string here called pubs and pubs2. Now, how do I use that in the code? In the connection string problem, I have a button for getting the connection string from the web config file, and that just defines a string called a connection string. And to get that, let me close out some of these to give us a little more room. Okay, and then to grab that, I use what's called the web configuration manager. So web configuration manager.connection strings, and then I specify the name or the tag for that connection string pub. Or pubs. So that has to match this exact name or tag up here, and then it'll return this connection string there. So this connection string will return. So I'm just grabbing the connection string there and using that. So in all of our code going forward, we'll always try to put the connection strings in the web config file and get to them this way. To the quick notes when we're coding these. So for web configuration, we need to include using system.web.configurations, and then for the database SQL stuff, right now we only need the system.data.sql client, and later on we might need another additional using here. I'm going to jump over then to looking at a local database and how the connection string varies a little bit there. So I've opened up another project, just a database test project, and here I've put the pubs database as a local database inside my app data file. And again, if I click on that, it'll open it up. Now it'll open up in Server Explorer rather than the SQL Server Explorer. But similarly, I can look at this database and I can grab the connection string here and copy it and paste it into my code. So I can use that same connection string here. Let me close this off so hopefully we can see this connection string a little better. So I pasted that connection string in here. Again, even the local database is opened up with SQL Server, so it's still, we'll see local DB and the version number here. But now you'll see hard-coded in here the whole path to that database Here's the long path to that database. And in fact, in this, I've had to go through, and this is one of those places where I've had to do lots of escape characters. So there are lots of single quotes in here, single backslashes that I've had to convert to double backslashes, and the double quotes I've had to put a backslash in front. So I've had to do a lot of escaping to get that to look right. And here's another double quote I had to escape out of. But I finally have that whole string in here connecting correctly. Similarly, in the web config file, I've had to paste it in here. But again, this is different. I can't use the backslash to escape here. So I've had to use single quotes, replace the double quotes with single quotes, and leave everything the same here. So that's the one exception. So again, there's lots of little things to get these, sometimes these connection strings working. But once you get one working, you can use it consistently from then on. So let's just run this real quick and see how this works. So here's my database with my new connection string. I can hit connect. And again, it's a server version here, but now I see where the database is. It's a much longer specification to the database itself, and the connection is open. One final trick I'll show with the local database is that if your database is in this apps data folder, there's a shortcut to that folder that you can use in your connection string. So inside my connection string, rather than specifying the full path, I can just, within vertical quotes, put data dictionary, and that will is a macro or a substitution for this apps data path. So I'll put the whole path to that in here at runtime. So I can shorten this up, and then it'll still connect up to the same database. In fact, if I run this, we can see it connecting up to the exact same database with the full path in here. There are lots of other tricks for creating connection strings. If you do lots of .NET development, you learn a lot about these connection strings, but this is just a short introduction, and so hopefully enough to get you able to create a connection string to connect up to the pubs database or a local database that you create.